campaign for Senate. The race to unseat Republican Senator John Cornyn has quickly become one of the country's most hotly contested in both the Democratic and Republican primaries. Now, instead of running for the Senate, Allred says he's going to run for the House, where he used to work, this time in a newly redrawn 33rd Congressional District. Democrat Colin Allred joins me now. Thank you so much for being here. What made you decide that you were going to change course?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on, Dana. Listen, I thought about this, for some time, and what I felt was that so many Texans across the state, had placed their trust in me and told me their stories, and I felt very moved by that. But I also feel a responsibility to do what I think is best for the state and for the party. And to me, going through a bruising primary, and in Texas we have a runoff, and we would certainly have a runoff in this case, was not in the best interest of the state or the party. But I also thought that in a time like this, when Donald Trump is daily violating the Constitution, and when so many folks are concerned about corruption and rising costs, that I still have a lot to give, and that I could serve in Congress and go in with a focus and a direction and with a strength of voice that's going to allow me to make a real difference.
I want to ask you about your House race in 1 second, but just staying on this Senate race, because it really could determine the balance of power in the U.S. Senate. Jasmine Crockett is very openly considering running. Is that part of why you decided to not run anymore?
Of course it is. And I think, listen, Jasmine's a friend of mine, and we've served together. And I've known her since before we were both, in elected office. But it was about the fact that with, 3 strong candidates running, that we would certainly have a runoff. And I felt that that was not, in the interest of the folks who had, come up to me, tell me their stories, who would open themselves up. And in many ways, to me, I've always thought about this and try to take my ego, out of how I approach public service. That I'm trying to, I ran for Congress, as you know, Dana, in the district where I was born and raised, against a Republican who'd been there for 22 years. Nobody thought I could win that one. And I ran for Senate to represent the state that's given me a chance to do all the things that I've done, from playing in the NFL, to being a civil rights lawyer, to serving in Congress. And so this is a continuation of my attempt to try and put people first, and now continue to serve my community just in a different way.
Can you tell me about the conversation that you had with your friend Jasmine Crockett, how that went down and how you made the decision to let her take the wheel? I assume that's the way that you view this.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't say I view it that way. It was a professional, friendly conversation, and what I took from that was that I needed to try and decide what I thought would be best, for the state, for the party, in a time and in a year where there is so much at stake. And this is not a normal time, Dan. And your last segment, covering 3 or 4 things that in any previous presidency would have been the biggest scandals of that entire presidency. This is not a normal time. And there are so many people who I've met who are so afraid. And in Texas, we are bearing the brunt of so many of this president's policies, from the tariffs to the immigration impacts in so many different communities. And there are so many people who place their faith and their trust in me. And part of that comes with the responsibility to try and put them first and see how I can best serve. And I know that I can be a strong voice in Congress. I can go in on day one to stand up to this president, but also to say some hard truths to the Democratic Party about some of the things that we have to clean up in our House to try and make sure that we're not seen as too elitist. Well, I think it's being seen as too elitist and too disconnected. I've been spending time working in restaurants and on construction sites, and anywhere I go, in grocery stores, everywhere I go, I will try and work a shift with working people there to try and talk to them about what's going on in their lives, and to make sure that we ground everything that I was trying to do in what working folks are going through, the folks who are living right now how I grew up, who are living paycheck to paycheck. I was raised by a single mom. I know what it's like to struggle. So we have to make sure that we reconnect with those folks and that we're speaking directly to them, but also that we clean up some of this corruption that I think is also holding back people's view.
And the backdrop of this, of course, is the fact that the Supreme Court said that the newly drawn districts that we covered really intensely here in Texas that are intended to give Republicans 5 more seats can happen before the midterms. So what you're doing is you're running in what will be the new 33rd district in Texas. It's really heavily impacted how Republicans have drawn this. Why do you think you can win in that district as a Democrat?
Yeah. Well, this is, let's be very clear. This is an incredibly gerrymandered map that we have here in Texas. Donald Trump racially gerrymandered our state. He demanded 5 new districts. The state legislature, like some whipped dogs, went ahead and just went along with that as quickly as they possibly could. And thanks to the Supreme Court, we're now in this situation where we have less representation in North Texas, where I live and have served, than we used to. But part of that is that this has now created this new district that covers much of the places where I was born and raised, where I grew up, and gave me a chance to do all the things that I've done. And I know Dallas, and Dallas knows me. And I've served this community in the past, and I look forward to serving it again. But what we have to do now is to be very strong in pushing back against an assault on our Constitution, but also on making sure that we refocus on working people and dealing with the corruption that I think is eating out and eating away at the faith in our systems as a whole, to believe that we can do anything at all.
And real quick, before I let you go, back to the Senate race, assuming Jasmine Crockett runs, there's another prominent candidate, James Tallarico. Are you going to endorse Congresswoman Crockett for the Senate run?
Yeah, I mean, right now I'm focused on the 33rd district that I'm hoping to serve, and I'll be making some statements about that down the road. But I can just say that I'm friends with Jasmine. I've known her for some time, and I think it's important that we go into November with a unified party ready to take on Cornyn, Paxton, Hunt, whichever.
Sounds like you want Tallarico to get out.
That's your words, not mine.
Okay. Fair. Congressman, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it on this very big day for you and this marquee race down there. We'll be right back.